Good afternoon, everyone, from our special Facebook Live session from the National Weather Service here in Indianapolis. I would encourage everyone, just as always when we do our Facebook Live sessions, go ahead and sign in on the comments area. Let us know where you're watching from. We're always interested to see where our audience is watching from. And in this special edition of Facebook Live today, this is a Q&A that we're going to have today. So this is your opportunity to ask the meteorologist here, namely our meteorologist-in-charge, Ted Funk, and myself, Jason Puma, any questions that you might have about the Weather Service, about winter, about anything that might be going on in that regard. So keep that in mind and go ahead and write those questions in there as we go along. But before we get started on that, I want to remind everybody that this is Winter Weather Preparedness Week, and that's why we're kind of doing this Facebook Live, to get people a little bit more aware of winter weather preparedness, and hopefully people are taking the proper precautions to get ready for severe winter weather when it comes this upcoming winter in the next few months. You might have noticed on our Facebook feeds and on our Twitter feeds, all of our social media platforms, we have all sorts of extra messages coming out this week. So we need you guys to help us out in that regard, because we have a lot of followers, but all of you have a lot of followers too. So if you guys can retweet our messages or share our messages with your friends and family, you'll never know who you might help out giving us that good information. So please feel free to share that information as we retweet it over the course of the week, and help us out. So with that being said, I want to introduce Mr. Ted Funk here, sitting to my left. Ted is the meteorologist-in-charge here at the National Weather Service in Indianapolis, and he's been the meteorologist-in-charge for a little over 2 years now. So he's gotten to know us here in central Indiana and gotten to know the area, and he wanted to join us today to talk to some of you, and so you can get to know him as well. So welcome, Ted.
Thank you, Jason. And welcome everyone who's listening live this afternoon. We really appreciate you being on here. We appreciate you following us and just being weather savvy and weather aware. And that's what we try to do here. As Jason said, I've been here in Indianapolis for a little over 2 years, but I'm not unfamiliar with the weather in the Ohio Valley, because I was at the National Weather Service in Louisville for many years. So I'm well aware of the weather that goes on across the Ohio Valley, and gosh, how tricky it can be and how quickly it can change. So as we move into the winter months here coming up, you never know it by today. It's 70 degrees out there, but it's not going to feel like that this weekend. So we want to make sure that we're always ready, and this week is dedicated to that, to make sure we're prepared and have an action plan as we move into the colder months here coming up shortly.
All right, so it looks like we got our first question here, and this is a question that's very common that we get all the time from people this time of year. They want to know what kind of winter it is going to be. And here's a question from Eva Schwab. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And she asks, does it look like Indiana will have a bad winter? Ted, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I can take that. Don't hold me to this now, okay? But we just had a meeting this morning when one of the staff members here on our staff here, he's kind of an expert. He looks at this every year and looks back at past years and how things were and how that compares to so far this fall and what we're looking at, and makes a really good forecast for the upcoming months. We also look at the Climate Prediction Center, and they put out these 90-day outlooks and winter outlooks as well. So based on that, and based on what we've seen so far here in central Indiana, it looks like, we've had some warm days here recently in early November. We did have a cold spell there in October for a while, but it looks like over the next 2 to 4 weeks or so, we're going to go back into at least near normal, if not colder than normal temperatures here, probably lasting through Thanksgiving and maybe into early December. The long-range outlook for 90 days, that would be December, January, and February, calls for what's called equal chances of below or above normal temperatures. Now that doesn't mean that we don't know what we're talking about. What that means is there's no clear signal that will definitely be above normal temperatures or below normal temperatures. So What that normally means is that we're going to see kind of like what we always see here in the Ohio Valley. We're going to see like a roller coaster. We're going to have warm periods and cold periods. The issue is when you average all that out, it comes out to what seems like a near normal winter, okay? But in fact, it's almost never near normal because you have above normal temperatures, you have below normal temperatures above and below. And when you average all that out, it comes out to near normal. So right now, there's no clear signals for whether we will average out above or below normal. Now we can look at last year, which was a similar type winter here. You know, the signals last fall were the same as right now going into the winter. So last winter, it ended up being very warm in December. This year, we think maybe it'll average out a little bit around normal instead of much above normal. But then last year in January and February, it ended up being a little bit colder than normal. So last year averaged out a little bit above normal overall, and so we can kind of take that as a way to think of how it's going to end up being this year as well. So again, probably roughly near normal, but that doesn't mean much because we'll have fluctuations of cold and warm, as is typical in this part of the country in the winter. Now, when we look at snowfall, last year was a below normal year for snowfall. And you might remember that we had a big snowstorm in early February last year, February 2nd, 3rd. And as people, what we normally do is we remember the big event or the event that just sticks in our minds. Maybe it had an impact on us. And because of that snowstorm, maybe we think, oh gosh, last year was such a snowy year, but it really wasn't. We ended up below normal snowfall last year. Our average snowfall here in Indianapolis is about 25 inches. So this year, while the forecast is for above normal precipitation for the season coming up, that could mean periods of rain and snow. So I think right now, based on what our expert here at our office has said, we could average near, maybe slightly below normal temperature or below normal snowfall. But the more active time for rain and snow will probably be after the new year. So January and February looks to ramp up from a more tranquil period here in November and December.
And that's a very good summary, Ted. We had one comment from an individual. His name was Dwayne Caldwell. He wanted to know about La Nina weather. And I would add that, as Mike discussed earlier today in his outlook, that we are in a slight La Nina pattern. And the favorable pattern for that is to set up a trough-like storm track over the Ohio Valley. So adding on to your precipitation, that kind of clearly states why we're leading towards a better chances for above normal precipitation for Indiana, because it's just more likely that those storms will be tracking across the Ohio Valley. It's just a matter of, will it be warm and be rain, or will it be cold and be snow, or will it be in the middle and be ice? So that's where our uncertainty in temperature comes into play.
In Indiana, unfortunately, with that storm track, you're usually in that path whereby, let's say, southern Indiana could be all rain, northern Indiana could be snow, and central Indiana here, it could be a mix. And that makes it tricky. It makes it a little bit more harder to predict with accuracy too far in advance. But so the bottom line here is you have to be ready for anything that the winter could bring. And when you know there's going to be a big snowstorm, you prepare and you take action. Maybe you stay home. If you have kids, maybe the kids are off from school. And if you're out on the roads, if you have to go out on the roads, you go slow and you're aware of it. But what concerns us somewhat is when you have types of precipitation that's not very much. It's just a little bit. So you don't think about it too much. It's like, okay, maybe there's going to be a half inch of snow today, or maybe there's going to be some freezing drizzle. Things that just like, oh, no big deal. I don't need to do anything different than I normally do. So sometimes that can lead to problems because, as we know, if you don't change your behavior, if you don't think it's a risk to you or to your family, you don't change anything you do. So you might drive on the interstate 60 or 70 miles an hour because you don't think it's a risk. But what happens is if you hit a patch of ice, say on on a bridge or an overpass, then you slide, and then if somebody behind you is following too closely, they may hit you as well. So we really have to be careful with not just the big events, but even the small stuff, because that can affect people as well.
Yeah, and that brings a good point of the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is to talk about of impact versus criteria. Now, a lot of people may not understand, well, the Weather Service issued a winter storm warning. What does that mean? Well, believe it or not, we have guidelines that we use to decide what kind of message, whether it's a warning or an advisory or a watch, of what we want to do. However, sometimes we bend those guidelines because of the impact of how it might affect people, whether it's during traffic hour or whether it's during a big event or something else going on. We may bend those rules. So let me just give you the general guidelines. So when we issue a winter storm warning, we're usually looking for 6 inches or more of snow in a period of 24 hours. All right, so that's what we're expecting generally when we expect a winter storm warning. If we issue a winter weather advisory, we're expecting snow amounts somewhere between 3 and 5 inches. Now, however, when we start throwing in freezing rain, sleet, that mixed precipitation that can be particularly problematic, then we start bending the rules a little bit. You know, the rules aren't hard and fast per se on the criteria. It goes into the impact, because when you start mixing in that icing, things change outside. It changes for power outages, trees possibly coming down, all those sort of things. So tell us a little bit more about impacts in regards to that.
Impacts are really important, because basically it's not about some arbitrary amount. It's about the impact it has on you, it has on us, it has on your family, your friends. You want to keep yourself and your family safe, aware of what's going on. So again, it doesn't matter if we issue a warning or advisory, which are somewhat based on criteria, but we do think of impacts in there as well. So let's say we're not going to get that 6 inches of snow, Jason, but we're going to get 3 to 5 inches, but we say it's going to happen at rush hour, or maybe it's the first significant snowfall of the year when people are not quite as ready for it. Maybe we'll, as you say, bend the rules, or those are guidelines, but we do what's best for the community and the people we serve, including you. So we might issue a warning even though it doesn't meet that criteria, but because we think it could have a significant impact, we want to make sure people are aware and take those proper actions to keep themselves safe, and to not, to change their behavior in order to stay safe and not get caught up in some of those smaller events which could cause issues.
Absolutely. Again, I wanted to reiterate, we're looking for some more questions in here, so if you do have some questions, it looks like we've got about 32 viewers right now. So we're looking for some more questions from your folks. This is your chance to interact with us. So
I'll throw in something more. I mean, obviously during the winter, we think winter weather, but we have to also be ready for severe weather, severe thunderstorms, and even tornadoes. They can occur any time of the year. Now, normally, obviously, they occur in the springtime. April, May, and June are our primary months here in central Indiana. But look at last year. You may remember December 10th, 2021, there was a big tornado outbreak in Kentucky. Unfortunately, many people passed away. It was a tragic event. And central Indiana, we potentially could have been part of that, but because those severe storms and tornadoes occurred in Kentucky, that kind of took some of the energy away from the storms that we had up here. So we basically got somewhat lucky in terms of how bad those storms were here. But we can't let our guard down for anything. I mean, obviously we're not going to have a heat wave like 80, 90 degrees in the winter, but we could have severe weather. We could have tornadoes. We could have snowstorms, ice storms, just windstorms, and just things that really do impact people. So we want you to always be aware, have an action plan, take the weather seriously, I hope you get the information, but another thing is the response. We can put all the information out there, but you have to be able to receive it and then respond appropriately to that. So that's what we're trying to stress here as well.
Yeah, so one thing that we mentioned there is getting the information. So when I think about one of the things we talk about during Severe Weather Preparedness Week and Winter Weather Preparedness Week is preparing an emergency kit for your home. And the first ingredient of that kit is a way to get that information. And not just having one way of getting the information, having multiple ways of getting the information. Because if one way fails, you want to have another way to get that information. So one way to get that, of course, and we're going to tell you about it, is NOAA Weather Radio. The great thing about weather radio is it's monitoring the weather for you when you're not watching the weather. If you're sleeping at night and you have your weather radio on, it's monitoring for our warnings. And if we issue a warning, it's going to make a loud noise. It's going to wake you up. And it's going to get you that information and get you to a safe location. Hopefully you can act on it, as Ted was saying, and get yourself to a safe location. Other sources of warning information that you can get, our partners in the media. They do a great job of conveying when we issue warnings and that sort of stuff as well. AM, FM radio, of course. And these days, definitely your phones. We always get lots of messages on our phones, and you can sign up for all sorts of warning notification availability on your phone as well. So keep that in mind, and you'll see lots of tweets this week about building a preparedness kit. It has all sorts of items. Building a preparedness kit for your house, especially for your car, because in the wintertime, that's when that's where we get most of our injuries in the wintertime, is people are out driving in hazardous conditions. And because of that, you want to have, if you're going to get stuck, slide off, you want to have the things that will help you survive that event, because you never know where you might be, whether you're in a rural area where help might not be able to get to you very quickly, or whether you're in an urban area where there could be a lot of things going on. Probably the number one thing to have in your car is a cell phone again, a cell phone charger.
Correct.
Having that extra battery so you can call for help in case your cell phone does die. But you'll see lots of other information on there. All right, let's see. We have a question here from Teresa Clark. She says, I have a question about weather radios. I know tornado thunderstorms are announced, but are they announced like blizzard and ice storm warnings, those sort of things? You want to take that one?
On weather radio, all severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings do alarm weather radio, and most phones now are set up to alert as well and go off, at least for tornado warnings. For severe thunderstorm warnings, not on your phone, but we have what's called a higher end now severe thunderstorm warning when we have like 70 mile per hour winds or higher and large hail. Now that's more likely in the springtime, but you never know in the cool season here as well. That's coming up that could happen, that will alarm your phone as well, but tornado warnings will. But again, whether you have a NOAA weather radio, whether you depend on your cell phone to get information, whether you depend on our TV meteorologists, our partners in media, who we interact with a lot as well, or whether you get that from a friend, a coworker, a family member, whoever that is. We want some way, as Jason just said, we want preferably multiple ways for you to get that information. And so NOAA weather radio, if the alarm goes off or your phone, that could wake you up overnight, which is important because severe weather and whether it's winter weather or severe weather, it just doesn't happen during the day. It can happen 24/7. So we just want to make sure that you have multiple ways to get that information. And again, know what to do once you hear the information and react accordingly and appropriately.
Yeah, and specifically, generally speaking, blizzard warnings, winter storm warnings, they do not automatically alert you. Mm-hmm. Because they're sort of a longer-term product, and unfortunately, well, it depends. It's a little bit of a touchy subject, because if we set out a blizzard warning and we toned alert and set off everybody's weather radio for a blizzard warning that's happening 12 hours ago, and we decided this at 4 a.m., people sometimes get a little angry that we alerted them at 4 a.m. for a blizzard that's coming later on that night. So generally speaking, because of the time that you need to react to a blizzard warning or an ice storm warning or a winter storm warning, generally when we issue that warning, you're going to have 12 to 36 hours beforehand to do what you need to do. And that's very different from a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning, where you might have literally seconds to do what you need to do. So that's why we do the different kinds of tone alert.
And that's a great point. I hope that answers your question, Teresa. But just know that what we want you all to understand is to just be weather aware. I mean, we send out information through our social media channels, and of course the TV meteorologists convey all that information as well. So just whatever you find is your best source of information, just keep being aware, especially if you know a system's going to coming up in the near future, next few days or whatever. Just keep tabs on that, and you'll know ahead of time what to do and what's going to happen.
All right. Our next question is from Alex Williams. And Alex says she's new to Indiana, and she wants to know more about what an average winter is like here in central Indiana. She's from Northeast Ohio, and in that part of the country, I actually am from Western New York. We know about the lake effect snows that occur on the downwind shores of Lake Erie. I know Buffalo, for example, averages about 90 inches of snow a year. I'm not sure of Cleveland. I bet you it's pretty similar, maybe a little less.
And that's a great question. And like you, Jason, I'm back in my high school days, long ago. I lived in upstate New York, the Syracuse area. So we got lake effect snow off Lake Ontario. So well aware of the high amounts of snow that those places and the snow belts can get. Now here in central Indiana, usually we don't get much of that, although especially in our northern parts of our area, say from Lafayette over to Muncie and then points north, I mean, even here in Indianapolis, we can get some snow off of Lake Michigan, but obviously it's not usually to the magnitude that you get off those snow belts right off the Great Lakes. So to answer your question, here in central Indiana, we average, I think for the whole season, from November right now through the time when we don't get any more snow, so at least through March. We've had some small events in early April before. We would average here right into Indy area right around 25 inches of snow. Of course, that's an average, and as I said earlier, some years might be very low, some years you might get a blizzard with you might get 60 inches, and that all averages out in the 20s. So again, that's somewhat deceptive, but roughly in central Indiana here, Indianapolis, around 25. It might be a little bit higher in communities to our north and a little bit less to our south across southern Indiana. And then as far as temperature goes, the coldest average temperatures here in Indianapolis occur in about mid to late January, and with average highs about in the mid to upper 30s and lows around 20, lower 20s. So maybe not a whole lot different than Northeast Ohio, but probably not as much snow if you're getting snow off of Lake Erie.
Yeah, definitely less snow here than Indiana. Than the shores of Lake Erie. Definitely less snow here in central Indiana. However, I would add that temperature-wise, you can actually be a little bit warmer next to the lakes, because actually the water helps you wouldn't know it but the water actually helps modify some of the very, very cold air masses and warm it up. Just like it's cooler in the summer, it can be slightly warmer in the winter, but when you're talking about temperatures of 25 versus 15, nobody really makes a big difference on that regard.
It's cold.
It's still cold either way.
And then, of course, the wind just adds another thing to that. Of course, then we have wind chill values, and we do want to make a point of emphasis of the wind. You get down to wind chills of near zero, and especially below zero, and you really have to be careful out there. And that's why we always say to dress in layers during the very cold weather, because I mean, you can trap some of that cold air in between different layers of clothing, so it really does provide better insulation often than just one thing on you, even if it's a heavy coat. So you have layers underneath, and then you have a heavy coat on top of you, and that will really help you and protect you from that wind and that cold. And of course, you want to cover your extremities as well as much as you can too when that harsh weather does occur.
Yeah, some of the people that are most susceptible to those colder temperatures, I think about our kids out there on the very cold mornings when they're waiting for the bus stops. Fortunately, a lot of our school districts in central Indiana, when we have those very cold temperatures and we issue a wind chill advisory, they might delay school a couple hours to let the cold air pass. I think anybody who's working outdoors, of course, you got to cover up on those very, very cold days. It doesn't take long for your skin to be exposed skin to be damaged by frostbite, or eventually, in a worst case scenario, your body temperature get lowered from hypothermia.
Yeah.
So
and pets as well.
Pets as well. Yeah, and we can actually get a lot of good. A lot of our followers are really great about pets. We'll mention that, and they'll tag on and they'll give us little messages about. Don't forget the pets too, and you're absolutely right. If you have dogs, or maybe an outdoor cat, they get cold too. So you want to allow them to stay warm during those very, very cold temperatures. All right.
Do you have any other questions?
Looks like we don't have too many more questions. I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to type in any more last-minute questions. While you type in your last question, I'm going to ask Ted a question about risk tolerance. And what does that mean, risk tolerance, and how can that be applied to reacting to winter weather conditions?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I've kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. Risk tolerance basically is everyone has a level of risk. In other words, an amount of risk that they're willing to accept, really without changing their behavior too much. So like we talked earlier about a little freezing drizzle or some light snow, whatever, that generally doesn't get anyone too excited. It's probably below our level of risk tolerance, or amount of risk that we're willing to accept. I mean, not for everybody, but for a fair number of folks. So you may not change your behavior, and that's what we were talking, going out and maybe driving on the interstate and going fast and then potentially getting in trouble because you hit a patch of slippery roadway. Whereby if we had a winter storm, like when we had early February of last year, let's say we have 6 to 10, 12 inches of snow or so, you know that ahead of time, you're prepared for it. You might go to the grocery store and get what you need for a couple days, just in case you can't get out. And then when you are out, if you're out, you know to go slow because that has reached above our level of risk. Okay, we know it's a big event, it has impacts, so we change our behavior accordingly. So and what also affects that is experience. Someone who's been through a hurricane. Unfortunately, we had the tragic Hurricane Ian down in Florida here recently. When people have been through that, or they've been through a tornado or some big event, something that has a lasting impression in their mind, that generally lowers the amount of risk you're willing to accept from that same type of phenomena, going forward in the future. So what you do then is you actually react to something that's maybe somebody else doesn't think is a big deal because they have a higher level of risk they're willing to take. So it's just kind of a thing that we all have, what triggers us to act, to react to different phenomena, whether it be weather or anything else in our lives. So we just want to make sure when it comes to weather that we have a level of risk that's low enough, so again, that we are reacting to not just the big storm, but the little stuff that we may not perceive to be a big deal, but again, could be for sure. We don't want that to happen. We want everyone to be aware and stay safe.
Yeah, those advisory situations when we have, just enough snow or ice on the roads to make it just slippery enough that you can't brake effectively or you can't accelerate effectively, those can really cause a lot of wrecks. I know we've talked with the Indiana State Police on some of those days, and they tell us, there's 150 wrecks on the interstates because, even though there hasn't been a whole lot of precipitation, there's been just enough to cause a lot of problems.
And that's true, because we did, I mentioned earlier, I used to work at the office down in Louisville, Kentucky, and we did a study down there several years back, and we looked at, the amount of precipitation and the type of precipitation in the winter, how does that affect the number of wrecks? And we kind of thought we knew what the result would be, and it actually was. It wasn't the big stuff where people were prepared, knew about it, and stayed home. It was the little stuff that people didn't think it was a big deal, maybe. They didn't necessarily change their driving habits, and there were a lot more wrecks on the interstates, and especially maybe at rush hour when you had more cars out there. So again, it's a perception, and that's why the whole criteria thing isn't something we just abide by. We go by what we think are the impacts and what will get people, potentially in trouble. We want to make sure that we're aware of that. We're not perfect, believe me. We're not perfect, and we get things wrong too. But we try our best. We look at events, what happened. We try to learn from them. The things we did well, the things maybe we could do a little bit better. Because essentially, we're here to serve you and to try to meet our mission of protecting life and property. And we have dedicated, really good meteorologists here, and we're trying our best for sure.
Okay, last question, because there's one question left, and Travis Garrity, he's asked it a couple times here, so he's asking about the snow forecast for next week. Now, honestly, today, I have not looked a lot at the weather today, so I'm just going to kind of give you a quick heads up of of the banter that I heard around the operations area today. And essentially, there's a chance for a system moving through next Tuesday that could bring us some snow. One of the models is saying, it could be a significant snow. Well, this is 7 days away, and that's just one model. So in the weather world, this is something, let's take a note of that. Let's keep an eye on it. Certainly there's a chance of snow, but as we get closer, we'll get a better idea, and we'll, as conditions warrant, we'll certainly, just as we talked, make you folks aware. So yes, there's a chance of snow on next Tuesday, but hold on for now.
Yeah. One of the things that we don't want to do, and we can't do, is we can't just look at one particular model, because one model might forecast an extreme one way and another model may forecast something totally different. So we have to kind of take all that information at hand and come up with kind of what we call a blend or a consensus of these different models. So there is a trend there for maybe some precipitation and temperatures that are probably chilly enough for some snow. It is still early November. Our temperatures outside on roads and on the ground are not particularly cold right now. They will cool down a little bit this weekend with our cold weather coming in. So just something to watch. Again, it may not happen at all, but it's something on the horizon, on our radar, so to speak. So we'll be keeping an eye out and try to message it and forecast as best as possible at once, and we'll see how the models kind of come into a consensus as we get closer.
That's right. And get ready for that cold weather coming this weekend. We have a strong cold front moving through, and these temperatures in the 60s, they're going to go away by Saturday and Sunday. We're going to be in the 30s, and it's going to feel like winter.
Yeah, I like the warm weather, so I'm not looking forward to that. But this is Indiana. We have 4 seasons, and appropriately we take them all, and we do the best we can with them.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week in this Facebook Live. You can look for future Facebook Live messages just like this, especially when we get a significant winter weather event. That's when we like to have these, or a significant severe event that we feel highly confident on. We'll try to have these sort of things to give you some of the inside information of what we're thinking about might happen, some of those impacts, and any sort of statements or warnings that we may be issuing in that regard. So again, summing up, it's winter weather preparedness week. Please share our information with your friends and family and all your followers as well. And as always, you can always follow us here on Facebook, send us messages, follow us on Twitter at NWS Indianapolis. You can send us messages there. We have meteorologists here 24/7, and we're always watching that sort of stuff, trying to figure out what's going on, and we will be happy to interact with you. So that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, and thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time. Hopefully we gave you some good information, and stay aware and stay safe out there.
Bye-bye.